Hello, welcome back to the Peaceful Creatives podcast. So lovely to be back recording again. I do this all the time. I have needed a little bit of a break whilst I have had a little bit of time off from work and then a few other things that cropped up as well. And I thought a really nice way to get back into recording would be recording a little Q1 or at least the first chunk of this year check-in, because we are a good few weeks into the second quarter of the year, so I'm not quite on time for a check-in for the end of Q1, but maybe we can be on time for the next one. Let's see. I thought it'd be really nice to just let you know what I've been up to, any updates based on some of the things that I've talked about in previous episodes, and just to kind of like collect ourselves, get back to basics, find where we are, and maybe help you have a think about some things, some reflections of how the year is going so far, because I don't know about you, but for me, when we get to Q2, that's when I start to realise that we are actually into the new year. We are into 2026, we're moving through, things are going well, and we can actually collect and see how everything is going. I have said before, I don't tend to set huge goals or huge yearly goals. I tend to have my goals kind of move throughout time with me and my business, but it's always a great time to reflect and see how everything is going. If you do set goals at the beginning of the year, then the end of each quarter is a great time to do that. And I always talk to the creatives that I work with in Book Not Busy and in my other programs and who I work with, and tell them to use this time to really reflect on what's going well, what feels like it's not working right, what do you want to experiment with, what are you really excited for coming up as well. So they're the few things that I'm going to share today. I feel like there's not too many updates aside from that. I have just been chugging along the past couple of months. I had a look and it's been 2 months since I recorded an episode. And in that time, I have had a launch for Book Not Busy. I've been working through my projects. I think the last main thing that I shared, or the last thing that I pulled together, was my private podcast series about how I booked 6 months of projects in a kind of busier inquiry period. And I'm kind of getting to the end of those projects now, so I'll talk a little bit about that. And I've just come back this week from the Easter break with my little boy as well. We had 2 weeks off together, which has been great. It's also his birthday around Easter as well, which is lovely. And finally, we're getting a little bit of sun in not so sunny Manchester. See if that actually continues or if we go back to daily rain, which is what we've been dealing with for the most part of the year. Anyway, let's jump into this Q1 check-in, and I'm going to start with things that have been going well. So the first 3 months of the year, what has felt really good in the business? What have I been enjoying? What has really worked in terms of the strategy and what I've had going on? And I think the main thing here, as always, is my booking system and my booking schedule. Again, like I said, that private podcast, which I'll link in the show notes or the description below, really highlights how I use inconsistent demand, which is really always the case in my business. I don't get very steady inquiries. I never have the same number of inquiries each week or each month. How I take that and kind of leverage it into a steady booking schedule, which really is the root of the strategy that I talk about and that I use in my own design business as well. And all of those projects have been going really well and just proven how much I love this strategy and how it works so well for me to enjoy working on my projects, to keep them on track, to take away stress, to present myself as the expert and work with people who really understand the work that I do and work with me in a really, really excellent way. And just further proof, not that I have needed it, because luckily I have had so many incredible clients over the years. For the sort of 7-8 years that I have had this booking system in place and used this strategy and been booked up fairly consistently, it's always led me to incredible clients, timely and spacious projects, and also just feeling really good in the business. So the design side of my business has felt great so far. Like I said, I've really loved all the projects I've worked on. My clients have all been incredible. It's just really exciting working on some different things and experimenting. I've also, alongside the projects that I booked, I've had some other kind of like retainer work come in from past clients, which is always really exciting to work on. And I guess another really important point as well is now I'm at the stage, we're sort of like nearing the end of April now. My projects were going up to the end of May. Now we're getting to the point where those projects are coming to an end. What happens next? And the amazing thing is that I have also booked additional projects since I had that 6 months of work booked in, which is another reason it works so well, because I had that 6 month buffer to find new clients, to talk to new people, to, you know, put more marketing out there and figure out what works and connect with new clients. So now I have other projects booked in up until summer, which is when I'm taking a good chunk of time off with my son for the summer holidays. So yeah, all of that feels really good, and this almost feels it's lovely to say, it's lovely to reflect on what I really enjoy about running my business, because when things feel steady and when you get to a point where business does feel very consistent, which I'm very lucky to say mine does, it can be very easy to dismiss the, I guess, like the joy and the ease and how much I love the steadiness that's in my business as well. It's really nice to reflect on that being a really good, sustainable and enjoyable part of the business. So that has been going really well. Alongside that, I've also been loving the work that I have been doing as a mentor. I have some incredible, everyone I work with just comes into my world and just feels like a really good fit. I think it's great that I get to, talk to people through this sort of format, talking to people on a podcast, or we have little calls, or we'll voice note, and they can see through my content, whether we're going to be a good fit. And it means that oftentimes when I do work with new creatives, we are an incredibly good fit. And it's great to then not just meet those people and have them trust in working with me, but then go through that work and really, really enjoy it as well. So it's been lovely to work with some new people in Book Not Busy and some one-to-one clients. It's just been really, really nice to feel so connected to that side of the work as well. So I guess in the good side, it really does come down to just like the steadiness of the business and enjoying what I've built, which is, again, something that I just love about the work that I do as well, is like getting people to the place where business just feels really, really easy and steady and, enjoyable as well. So really great to hear that I can use those benefits as well and make the most of my own business in that sense. So moving into the things that haven't felt as good, and it's going to unfortunately sound like there are more things here than the good things, which I think on reflection, if I were to think of the balance, the good definitely outweighs the things that feel bad. I definitely don't feel like the bad is taken over right now. But the main thing that I've been struggling with, just the ongoing problems that I have with my health at the moment. So I think I've shared in a previous episode that in terms of like my capacity, my capacity was very, very low at the end of 2025, and then luckily found a medication which gave me a little bit of kind of life back and made life feel a little bit more livable for me, and in which sense I mean that I didn't have to be lying down all the time. Like I could actually go out and do my work a little bit more consistently, which obviously helps as well. And just kind of like be a bit more of like what I see as me, be a bit more of a person that I recognise. But unfortunately, I'm not quite at the bottom of the health issues. So even though I do have a medication that helps things feel a little bit easier, I'm definitely still limited on capacity. And as someone who, I love work, I've built my business to have space, but when I am in the work, when I'm designing, when I'm mentoring, when I'm on my calls, when I'm doing any part of the work that I've sort of created in the business, I do love that bit, and it is part of why I love the business that I've built, and I like having space because it makes me enjoy the work more. And it has felt really difficult to have the expectation of like doing some work and then maybe not having the capacity to do so. And that has not so much reflected on the projects or on the way that I'm mentoring in that side of the business as well, but more so the additional pieces that come with business. So, marketing, finding a really good balance with how much time I can spend on my marketing, or building systems behind the scenes. Like, these are, again, the pieces, the really like nerdy pieces that I enjoy doing, that I unfortunately just have not had the capacity to do. And because of that, some of the system pieces, so I'm talking like some email automations that I would love to have, or some additional pieces in my kind of like design workflow or like process, have like fallen by the wayside. And that's something that I don't feel great about. Like, I do really like to feel on top of things, even if they're not like the most crucial parts of the business. For me, it is every piece of the business is important. Like, I want to make every piece of it work together, almost like a machine with all these different cogs. And if one thing feels a little bit off, it can make the whole piece feel a little bit off. And I don't necessarily think that's reflecting to the outside, but it just internally makes me feel a little bit more like scattered. And I don't know, like my sense of being a good leader in the business is sometimes then shifted, and that doesn't make me feel great. It can knock my confidence a bit. It can make me feel a little bit like, oh God, I can't do this. And is it always going to be this way? Like, the health side of things is just so frustrating. I really empathize with people who have limited capacity in a sense that is just like immovable, like chronic illnesses, disabilities. Those sorts of things have such a huge impact on capacity. And even with a business that is built around my capacity, it does shift things, obviously, when that changes. Alongside being like a parent as well. Like, I love spending so much time with my son, but that in itself can drain a lot of the energy that you have there. I think the other thing that has not gone badly, I wouldn't say it's something that I think is what's not gone well, but something that I'm really looking to change, and I'll go into this when I'm talking about like the experimentation side of things, is launching for Book Not Busy. I went through a launch in March/early April, so before the Easter break that I've had for a couple of weeks, and the launch was great in that I brought new people into Book Not Busy, and that's essentially the goal. When you think of like a launch, you think, oh, well, you've made sales and people have come in, and that's great. Everyone who's joined is excellent as well. Like, I really, really love working with the people. What I said before is so true. Like, the people who I connect with are always just an excellent fit, which is brilliant because it means that we can work really nicely together. But I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, it's been 2 months since I created made a podcast episode, recorded or sat down and made a video. And a huge part of that is because launching as an activity and as a like strategy and part of the business, I find really, really draining. And I think I actually did a podcast recently about why I don't launch in my design studio, why I don't think launching is necessary, why it doesn't make sense for me as a creative, why I think it doesn't make sense for the people I work with either. And it's really interesting because my whole philosophy and thought process around that is I get to run my business in the way that I want to. But for some reason, when it comes to mentoring and selling a program, I didn't quite take that message to heart enough. And I think I assumed that for that type of business, the same rules didn't apply. And coming to this conclusion has been so interesting for me, because it's interesting for me to see how loudly I can preach that you can have the business that you want and you can build things in the way that feels really good for you, and you don't have to follow the shoulds. These are things you would have heard from me over and over and over again if you listen to these episodes. I'm still finding that there are certain business rules, in air quotes, that I feel pulled towards, or that I feel like I can't shift away from. And so it's been a really like eye-opening and kind of exciting discovery to go, do you know what, actually, I don't like this part of the business as much as I think I could, and I'm sure that there is a better option for me elsewhere. That has been really exciting because it gives me the opportunity to do something different and to experiment with something that I think would work better. Again, going back to like the health side of things, launches are very energy intensive. Like, there's a lot of writing a lot of emails and thinking through all the systems, those things that I mentioned that I'm struggling to kind of get my brain into alignment with, setting things live at the right time and being available to answer questions, which I want to be able to do. But if there are days when my capacity just doesn't support that, then that means that there's a part of my business that isn't working for me as a person, like for me as a human being. And is that not what I'm always talking about? I'm almost becoming a contradiction of what I share. And I think I've always had this one rule for the creative service business, because that's who I work with. That's who, they're my people. That's who I feel like I can talk to so directly, because that's the business that I've really, truly kind of built for myself and know the strategy to build around. And then there's the mentoring side, the strategy side of the business, working with creative service providers. And in that, I kind of shrink into a version of myself that I feel like I should be. I need to follow certain rules for how I share information about the program. I need to set the sales page up in a certain way. I need to share the pricing in a certain way. I need to get people into the program in a certain way. And none of it is true. And I think like that kind of is the baseline lesson here, is that none of that is necessary. And there are so many things, like every part of the business we can experiment with. And that's maybe a lesson to just keep continuing sharing and reiterating if there are parts of the business that you think you would like to change. If it comes down to not enjoying how you do your marketing, if it comes to not enjoying how you share your signature service, or like you actually work through the workflow of your projects, the clients that you are working with, all of these things are changeable parts of the business. Even the things that are crucial, so sharing your business, being visible, that's a crucial part of business. How you do it is entirely up to you and entirely up to me. Like, that's a part of the business that I can change. So that has been a really interesting, almost like epiphany. I've been launching Book Not Busy in different formats for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. So switching that around is going to be very interesting. And that takes me into what I'm experimenting with, what I want to experiment with moving forward based on what's happened in Q1, quarter one. I always feel a bit stuffy saying like Q1, but we'll stick with it. And in that is going to be a more spacious, intentional, for me, in terms of like the way that I work, and fitting way to, I guess, like open up the program, to open up Book Not Busy and to share the work that I do as a mentor and as a strategist. And I hope this is, although this isn't necessarily talking towards the service business side of things, I hope this also shows that there is so much space for experimentation in business across the board. And it can feel a little bit scary to make those changes, especially if you don't have a really clear idea of what that's going to look like, or especially if there aren't many examples of other people doing something that you want to do. There are plenty of people who do that, who like have programs and sell them on Evergreen or whatever. So that's not what I'm talking about right here. But I hope you can, if you're having a bit of reflection here and you think, oh, actually this thing doesn't quite work for me, there is always room for experimentation. There's always room for change. And what that looks like, I have a rough idea. If you're interested, I can talk about that a little bit more. But like I said, it doesn't quite line up with the service side of business. So I will kind of leave it there. But I'm experimenting with how I sell a program as easily as I sell my design services. That's really the goal here, is how can I make selling my work as a mentor and a strategist feel as easy as selling my design services? Because that bit I don't stress about. It doesn't take too much capacity from me. It doesn't take too much energy. It doesn't feel like I need to give so much output. And it's also not as seasonal, which means that I don't have to switch other things off for 2 months or even 6 weeks. I don't have to stop recording my podcast because I'm in a launch. I don't have to dial certain things back so I can give more energy to a different part of the business. I want things to feel steady in this side of the business. And maybe this is an experiment that you will want to follow along with as well. So yes, that is that side of it, is how do I match my capacity with every single part of the business? How do I make sure every part of the business is flowing, moving in tandem and feeling really good for me? That is what I'm experimenting with when it comes to the next quarter of the year. And what am I really excited for? What am I working on? What do I feel really good about going into the next quarter based on the quarter that we've just worked through, the quarter that we've just lived through? The first thing is I'm going to revamp the Book Not Busy curriculum. And the reason for this is I'm going to go into a little bit of a side tangent, but there was a program that I saw that I was in maybe a couple of years ago that I absolutely love. I'm not going to mention the program because this is not that I am saying that they're doing anything wrong. I loved the program when I was in it, and I'm sure it's still excellent. That are moving towards a very like AI focused curriculum, and I've seen a lot of places doing the same. You know, using a lot of AI for the way that they teach, the way that they want people to learn, and those sorts of things. So this is a slight tangent, but it does come into my thought process with Book Not Busy. Because I personally don't want to use AI as an educational tool right now. It doesn't make sense for what we learn inside Book Not Busy. It doesn't make sense for the strategy that we really need to add like a human element to make it work. But I do want the ease that you get from using AI. I do want there to be an ease of working through the program that currently feels like you only get it through using AI tools. So this led me to a bit of a rabbit hole where I must admit I spent quite a long time figuring this out and working on something that I now feel incredibly excited about, which is basically an all-encompassing kind of strategy tool inside Book Not Busy that is automated, that does a lot of the work for you, that takes away a lot of the time that you need to spend strategizing and gives you almost like a starter blueprint for the changes that people in the program can make before actually jumping through and then going through the theory in a little bit more depth. Because a lot of the people who join the program are already overwhelmed, already burnt out, already at their capacity, at their limits. And I know that adding a new thing into that process, into the work week, can feel really difficult. I'm at risk here of going into this in a little bit too much detail because I'm so excited about this work that I'm doing. But I've essentially built a almost portal that's very automated that you can put in, you know, dates, information about your business, your income goal, your capacity, the way that you want to work, those sorts of things. And then a lot of the results for the strategy. So how you plan your signature service, how you map out your work week, how you plan your booking system, booking schedule will then all be done for you. That is the main thing that I'm excited about working on this quarter. With that, there'll be a bit more like recording videos and stuff alongside that, but that is really exciting. And then just getting back into recording videos, sharing the podcast, speaking to you a little bit more about any topics that you feel like you want to hear about. I really do want to get into a rhythm with this, and I do think the changes that I'm hoping to make in the business will help with that. So yeah, it's all about, this quarter is about taking the experiences of the year so far and really molding them into how I can build more steadiness, more consistency, and feel really good in the business as well, which is ultimately the goal. You know, the better I feel, the more at ease I can feel in my work, the more I can handle energetically, you know, based on my own capacity, the better the business can run, the more, I guess, like success, again, air quotes, I can reach. And the more I feel like my business is going to really, really work for me in the long term as well. So that's always my goal. Always my goal is to make it work better for me in any sort of way. So yeah, I guess that is where I can wrap up. Good things, bookings have felt great, projects have felt great, more bookings on the horizon as well. Bad things are worrying about my health, my capacity, and, you know, how the business works for that. Experimenting with those launches and figuring out how my, you know, different income streams, different parts of the business can work. And then just really excited for a few new things that I'm keeping fresh and moving forward with in the business. This has been much longer than I thought it was going to be. I was like, I'll just do a quick 10-15 minute check-in. And as usual, I've yapped away for much longer. But thank you so much for listening. I will be back with regular kind of guidance-based, you know, information-based episodes next week, and hopefully sharing some more YouTube videos in the meantime as well. Would love for you to subscribe if you are watching along. Send me a little comment. Let me know if you've listened to this episode. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you have an incredible week, and I will be back with you soon. If you want to talk to me in the meantime, jump over to @GattoCreativeMentor on Instagram or YouTube, and I'd love to chat with you there. Have a lovely week. Speak to you soon.